Welcome back to another episode of the North Star Takes podcast. I'm Bailey Policki. He's Jacob Liberta. Shout out to Liberta for holding down the fort last night while the Cousins news broke. Obviously, I was at the Minnesota Wild game, as you mentioned, watching Cap Finn's number get retired and raised to the rafters. Then, of course, the Wild came out flat and kind of had a stinker of a performance, which tends to happen to teams that are retiring jersey numbers. I don't know what the deal is with that, but must be the emotions or something in the building. But we're not talking about the Wild today. We're going to be talking Minnesota Vikings football because obvious news yesterday, they gave Kirk Cousins a 1-year extension, threw in a no-trade clause, so he's basically here for the next 2 years, unless there's a situation where he would somehow waive his no-trade clause, which could potentially happen, but I highly doubt it. So let's get right into it. Liberta kind of covered most of it. I have a little bit to say about it as well since I wasn't on the pod last night. Clearly, you and I are in agreement here. We were not in favor of an extension by any means. We didn't want to prolong this Kirk Cousins experiment that has failed after 4 years. And let me clarify, it has not been Kirk Cousins' fault necessarily that this experiment has failed. I mean, they have done a poor job of constructing a roster, but a lot of that is due to his high cap hit he's had ever since he's been here. We had a 13-3 team that he immediately brought back down to 500 the year after. In 2018, we missed the playoffs after not beating the Bears at our home stadium the last week of the regular season to get in the playoffs. 2019, we did make the playoffs, albeit we had an incredibly easy schedule that season. I think it was like the month of October, I believe. Kirk Cousins was on a roll. We went 4-0, but we played some horrible teams. So it was just kind of a nice stretch of the season to kind of bolster our playoff standing. We won a playoff game, which was unexpected, so I'll give him that. And then the last 2 years, I mean, Kirk Cousins statistically has played probably his best football his last 2 years, but the team in general has been horrible. The defense has completely eroded. It's aged out. They haven't been able to draft and develop anybody on the defensive side of the ball. Now, granted, we have a new regime in here. Maybe they have a plan to fix the defense, but it's just kind of confusing to me how you would swap out your GM and coach. And from the sounds of it, in an Athletic article I read this morning, it sounds like the Wilfs wanted Kirk Cousins to be around because they did not want to rebuild. It seems they were convinced that Spielman and Zimmer were simply the only problems. And yeah, they can take a bulk of the blame because obviously Zimmer did a horrible job as a head coach the last couple seasons, wasn't connecting with players, didn't talk to his GM. So obviously that's not good. And Spielman did a horrible job of drafting and developing. So, but I mean, Kirk Cousins is somewhat to blame too. I mean, if you're paying a quarterback that much money, he's got to be able to elevate the team around him. He's got to be able to rise up in adverse situations. And we just haven't seen that from him other than that Saints playoff game where he actually led the drive down the field in overtime. That's probably about the most, clutch I've seen Kirk Cousins. He had a couple game-winning drives this past season, albeit against some pretty bad teams. Carolina Panthers come to mind. Detroit Lions at the end of the game where Greg Joseph nails that long field goal comes to mind. So I don't know, like Kirk Cousins is still a good quarterback. We know we're going to get good quarterback play probably for the next 2 seasons. He's going to keep putting up numbers. He's going to keep getting Jefferson the ball. So offensively, statistically, I'm sure we'll still be pretty good. But can we stop with the 3-and-outs? Can we stop stalling on drives? Can we stop putting the defense in bad situations? Because I think that's part of the reason why the defense struggled so much is the offense had led the NFL in 3-and-outs. Time of possession was not great with this offense. I know O'Connell's got his thoughts and he's going to install his scheme and all that stuff. Maybe that can change some things. I don't know. But to me, clearly the signals that they are not, aiming for any sort of a rebuild. They're basically probably going to run it back. I'm sure a couple guys are going to get cut here. But, what are your thoughts, Alberta? Where do you think they go from here with the rest of their roster construction? Obviously, we've talked in previous videos about all these sort of guys that are on the bubble of whether or not they'll maybe be on the team or not. Where do you think they go from here now that, albeit we cleared up some cap space, I still believe we're just slightly over the cap. So we still got to create some room here.
Yeah, I think going from here, going forward, I think you got to look at the situation immediately around Kirk and trying to surround him with the best players possible and the best environment possible. And that probably starts with the 2 biggest holes in this offense remaining, and that's the center and right guard position. I think you really got to explore what your options are, especially at center and free agency, just because the in-house options we have don't really wow me. I mean, Mason Cole isn't even under contract, and then Garrett Bradbury's just been a Boston first-round pick, like I mentioned last night. So I think that's probably what I'd like to do first. And then as far as right guard goes, I kind of want to know what they feel internally about Wyatt Davis. Like if they think that he can play and step right in and be fine, like sure, more power to you. That's great. And that's a place you're going to save money at, which is awesome. But if you don't feel like he'd be ready to go here, like right now in 2022, then I think you certainly got to explore that avenue in free agency as well with a guy like maybe Brandon Scherf. I know that's been floated out there as far as him having ties to either Minnesota or Kansas City just because his family is rooted in Iowa and he'd like to be closer to home. So maybe that's an option there. I know Corbett out in LA, that's another one, but the list goes on. I think there's quite a few good interior offensive linemen in free agency this year, which is good for us really in this spot. And it's not something we can address in the draft this year because when you look at it, it's first of all, you're probably not going to find a plug and play interior offensive lineman besides Tyler Linderbaum, and that's not what I want to do with our first round pick. And then beyond that, the class is overall pretty weak. So I think that's got to be a free agency thing, and then you're going to have to move money around to basically make that work, to bring in a competent guy at a decent price tag. So then you're going to have to look to the other side of the ball probably and take away more from your defense that almost feels like it doesn't already exist. So truthfully, I think you got to start with the interior of the offensive line and then work your way towards the defense and really determine how you're going to shore it up enough to the point where it's not going to be a total liability and it's not going to lose you games. It's just going to kind of hover around average, you would hope. So realistically, I think that's the two biggest things is plugging those holes in the interior offensive line and then making some critical roster decisions defensively to put at least a non-bad unit on the field. So
yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think offense should certainly be the focus in free agency. Like you mentioned, there's quite a few good interior offensive linemen out there available. So that's the direction I would go. Clear up some cap space. If you can get Brandon Scherf, solidify your right guard spot, then you're literally just looking for a center.
Yep.
Scherf's probably a higher price guy, so I don't know if we'll be able to afford that given how much salary cap space we're going to create. I'd imagine like Michael Pierce still probably gets cut. It sounds like Adam Thielen's going to renegotiate his contract. Clear up more cap space there. Danielle Hunter, obviously they're going to have to do something within the next few days. Otherwise that roster bonus hits. And I would imagine with Kirk Cousins coming back, Danielle Hunter is probably going to be back as well, just because you need that elite edge rusher. And whether it's a 3-4, 4-3, I don't think it really matters with a guy like Danielle Hunter. And then the other two that are kind of, have been brought up, as well as Harrison Smith and Eric Kendricks. And I don't see Harrison Smith going anywhere. I don't even know if they'd be able to restructure his contract with how much, still got like 3 or 4 years left on that deal. So Eric Kendricks, I'd really like to see him back because I just think he's the rock and the centering part of this defense. I mean, he's obviously the middle linebacker, but I think he's the true leader of the defense. And I would hate to see him go because I think, over the last couple of years, he's been the best player on the defense with Danielle Hunter being out so much. So if Kendricks is the one that, has to bite the bullet and he's gone after this whole Kirk Cousins extension, I'm going to be pretty upset because they could have had an opportunity to move on from Kirk, which then you could have justified moving on from Danielle Hunter as well, because then you're just in a rebuild. Michael Pierce, obviously, he's probably gone either way. So, they could have cleared out a ton of cap. But now if Eric Kendricks is, the cap casualty of this, I'm going to be pretty upset because we are just bare at linebacker. We have absolutely nothing there. But as I was talking about, going offensive-minded in free agency, the draft is probably going to have to be majorly defensive focused because you and I have talked at length about how we're probably going to pick a corner at number 12. It's kind of looking like Sauce Gardner probably won't make it to 12, so maybe Derek Stingley, Trent McDuffie is a name that has been popping up as well. So, I mean, yeah, I know you and I are not very excited about the Trent McDuffie proposition. So maybe Stingley can last that long. Who knows? But or it's an edge rusher too. So, I mean, they got some holes for sure. I mean, corner, edge, linebacker, and you probably need another safety as well. You got Cam Bynum, but he's not a for sure thing, and you still probably want a third safety in there with Harrison Smith. So, the defense is a complete mess, but I don't know how much of that they're really going to be able to fix in free agency. It'd be kind of nice to bring a guy in like Zadarius Smith, who just got cut by the Packers, but I'm sure he'll get more money elsewhere, whether it's like the Ravens I saw were interested in. There's also a couple other teams that are interested in him. So what are your thoughts, I guess, on the approach to maybe offense and free agency, defense, and the draft?
That's probably got to be the way to go because offensively, we're just plugging a couple holes, so you can probably afford to do that. But defensively, there's just too many things to know where to start. So realistically, I think you're going to have to start building a foundation defensively with a new core group of guys, just because we've talked about this at length before too, that we just don't have any young and up and coming defensive players that you can definitively say will be here even 3 years from now. So I think we need to start replenishing our roster with those kinds of guys, and that starts probably at pick 12 with somebody. It would be nice to get a Sauce Gardner, but like you said, he's probably going to go top 10, especially after a good combine. And then Stingley, who knows, he might also go top 10. And then there's certainly a ton of edge rushers that are probably going to go in the first 2 rounds, so you might want to get in on that too. And you're just going to get really tremendous players for really cheap, and that's probably what we need on the defense. So I think I like that idea, the offense and free agency and the defensive draft.
Yeah, for sure. And so what do you think what do you make of this idea that they're basically not rebuilding, that you're bringing in a new regime, but they're basically taking over the leftover parts, excuse me, from the old one, and they're basically running it back with the addition of, clearly hopefully some impact free agents across the offensive line, maybe even defense, and then obviously draft picks as well. I mean, they're going to have a couple rookies that probably contribute right away this year. So what are your thoughts on them basically taking this team that's been 500 or slightly worse the last few seasons and trying to basically make it into a Super Bowl contender? Because let me be clear, the expectation is not to just make the playoffs as a wild card when you're paying Kirk Cousins this much money and you're keeping that offense intact. I mean, the expectation should be division championship, Super Bowl contender. That should be the expectation for this team, given that they're not willing to hit the reset button. So are we just going to keep, being patient with them and, next year they'll be even better? And you can't keep doing that with a guy like Kirk Cousins around here. You gotta reset the cap at some point. So what are your thoughts on just them pushing off the rebuild even longer?
Yeah, the more and more I hear about it, it's just, this is foolish by the Will family to think that we're still in a win now mode and a win now window, when I really do not think we are. But since they've chosen this path and really pigeonholed Kwesi and KOC into this, they better have a good plan in place to make it happen, because I don't think we should reset expectations just because we have a new regime. If we're keeping this 34-year-old quarterback leading the team and paying him all this money, like, we better get some results too. So
yeah,
I think this is not the way I would go, but since this is the path we're going down, then better make it happen and make it happen fast, because like you said, I can't take any more of this, next year crap. Like, that's a load of garbage, that, and this is what we've been saying for years now, and I'm just sick of it. So you better make something happen, make it happen fast.
Yeah, you said it perfectly there. I mean, I don't get why you would bring in a new general manager. Like, I can understand, you keep Spielman around, you get a new head coach, maybe you just try and change things that way. But you literally fired Spielman, who constructed this roster, and basically said, oh, no, this roster is good enough. We just got to add more pieces. I mean, that makes zero sense. Why was Rick Spielman fired then?
Yeah, exactly. There must have been some serious tension there, or the Wolves must firmly believe it was Rick and Zim and no one else, because I don't think they'd move on from the right-hand man like that for any other reason and just want to run it back. So there's something weird there that doesn't really make sense at the moment. So it's hard to say what their expectations really are. Like, we're thinking Super Bowl, but maybe they're just thinking staying away from the bottom and staying in the playoff picture, so we're not some embarrassment in the league, even though that should not be the goal. I'm kind of starting to get concerned that is the goal here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, because the Wolves have never really been willing to bottom out. I think they were pretty embarrassed after the way that whole Leslie Frazier era ended. And obviously Zimmer came in and stabilized things, which was good. But and by no means am I turning on Kwesi or Kevin O'Connell yet, because I think this is largely driven by the Wolves, which is frustrating, because like I said, why would you hire a new GM and then tell him what to do?
Sure. Who do you think you are, Jerry Jones or something?
Exactly. I still dig the analytical approach by Kwesi. I think I think he'll be able to figure out some stuff that way through the draft or cap construction, all that different stuff. And I trust O'Connell to build a good offense. I mean, I think Kirk Cousins could absolutely have his best, play his best under Kevin O'Connell. But when it comes down to the situational stuff and you just need a big play from Kirk, you need him to fit it into a tight window. You need him to make the risky throw. You need him to extend time in the pocket because his receivers just aren't quite open yet. Can he do those things? It's only it's 1 or 2 plays a game that are like that really make a difference. For the large part, Kirk Cousins has been a good quarterback, but it's these little things here and there. and they always find themselves in these close games. Is coaching really going to be the difference there? I mean, I guess I don't necessarily believe it, but that's kind of the way they're looking at it, I think. So I still want to give Kwesi and O'Connell a chance because I do think they're really bright. They're young. I think this team will eventually go in a new direction, but maybe it's just going to be in a couple of years, obviously, with the extension of Kirk Cousins here.
Yeah, exactly. No, we just got to hope that KOC really is the equivalent of Sean McVay and can squeeze every last possible ounce out of this good, not great quarterback and turn him into a Jared Goff that is just in a good system that can take a team all the way to the Super Bowl like they did a few years back. And because I don't even think Kirk is as good as Stafford, and so I'm not going to directly make that comparison to Stafford making the Super Bowl last year. So realistically, I'm looking more at that Goff here, and that's really the only pathway I see this working in the slightest. So now we got to cross our fingers that O'Connell is really always cracked up to be, and Kwesi is really good at thinking at the margins and able to maximize guys at low dollar values when we have limited cap space to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be interesting to see. We're going to be doing Vikings videos probably all week as the news comes rolling in on what they do with some of these key guys and who, potentially, signing some important guys as well that can help this team out. So they still got a ton of work to do with the salary cap. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do over the next several days. But that will do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. As Liberta mentioned last night, shout out to Nathan Bachman for the awesome new logo and intro we got. And we even got a little banner up there now. So kind of nice to have a new logo and kind of get a re-imaging of the North Star Takes podcast as we're kind of entering a new basically a new year. We've been doing this for about a year now, so exciting stuff. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and click like on this video. Feel free to give us a follow on both Twitter and Instagram and leave your comments below. What are your thoughts on what the Vikings are doing? Are you upset? Do you think this is the right move to try and compete for a Super Bowl potentially? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, thanks for watching.